in covering a presidency that is every single day summed up by its unprecedented and unparalleled combination of callousness, incompetence, and surrealness, Donald Trump and his administration have managed to outdo themselves today, likely endangering national security, his own staff, and the journalists whose job it is to cover all of them in the process. Alarming new reporting finds that Donald Trump used his own staff and White House journalists as decoys amid security threats from Iran, having them fly out of Turkey on the old Air Force One while Donald Trump flew out on a separate unmarked aircraft. Donald Trump pulled this off by being smuggled in a catering truck, if you can just let your brain try to picture that, to his separate unmarked aircraft. The Washington Post, who broke this news, reports this, quote, Trump boarded the old Air Force One jumbo jet in view of the television cameras. He was secretly shuttled minutes later to a smaller plane, an Air Force C-32A, via an airport catering truck typically used to load meals and other supplies pre-flight, according to a U.S. official and corroborating material reviewed by the Post. That made Air Force One a decoy, with media and some White House staff aboard. The maneuver meant that Trump's actual location was concealed from the American public and many senior U.S. officials for hours. Weeks later, it remains unclear how widely the administration has disclosed the operation. The Washington Post found pool footage showing Donald Trump boarding Air Force One. A catering truck then pulls up to the plane and moves over to what we now know was the plane Trump ended up departing Turkey on board. Both planes then landed in the UK, and Trump was then secretly moved back onto the old Air Force One to keep up the ruse. He then disembarked in full view of reporters and boarded his Qatari-donated Air Force One, the big fancy one, to return to Washington. At the time, it was reported that Trump would be leaving Turkey on the old Air Force One rather than the Qatari Air Force One due to security threats from Iran. What is new here is that we're now learning for the first time that Trump flew on neither aircraft. In fact, he departed on a third plane. Trump vehemently denied the reporting about the reasons behind the first switch that we knew about at the time when pressed by reporters on the ride back to Washington. Reporters who were unaware they had just been used as decoys by the President of the United States. Watch that with this new information in mind.
What was the security concern that caused us to change lanes?
We sent this one in so that the Air Force Base here was in the same exact line.
So you're saying there wasn't a security concern?
No.
Do you know why the assholes are window blinds? That was figured.
Well, yeah, because you're probably on a dangerous flight because of the sleazebags that we have to deal with.
So you think that Iran was possibly thinking of trying
Well, I mean, if they asked you to close your windows, probably they feel that way. They didn't ask me to close mine, but if they did, I would have done it. Now, these are sick people, so I could see something like that. I didn't know they did that, but I could see something.
Were you aware of any credible threat by Iran against Air
I
Force
have a
One?
threat all the time. I'm number one on their list before you. But if I go, you go. Right?
What was their
So
specific threat today?
perhaps someday you want to change professions.
If I go, you go. When he said it, he knew it wasn't true, right? He'd just been shuttled off the plane that the press he's talking to right there were on. So when he says, quote, if I go, you go, he knows he's lying. An elaborate fabrication. A lot of unnecessary steps there taken to sustain the lie. In a statement to the New York Times, the White House said, quote, they use every tool at our disposal, including distraction and misdirection, to address threats against the president. Donald Trump engaging in an extraordinary act of deception is the latest proof that he's lost complete control of the war with Iran, is where we begin today with New York Times White House correspondent Maggie Haberman. She's the author of the bombshell bestseller, Regime Change. She confirmed the operation for the Times after the Washington Post first broke this story. She also is one of the journalists who first reported about the security threat and one of the reasons we know about it. Also joining us, Ned Price is here. He served as an official in both the State Department and the CIA. And with me for the hour, former Assistant Special Agent in charge at the FBI, National Security and Intelligence Analyst Michael Feinberg's here. Maggie, just untangle this web of perhaps a legitimate security threat. Let's give them the benefit of the doubt. And then a rather unparalleled deception involving White House staff and press. And, oh, by the way, subpoenas for 5 New York Times journalists in the middle of all this. Just unwind and unpack all that for us.
Let me put it that way. Well, thank you for having me. It's my colleagues and I confirmed what was pretty astonishing reporting from the Washington Post, and we have to tip our hat to them. But yes, what looked like one thing at the time, a president taking an older Air Force One, for old time's sake, in his words, the press only knew about this, the public only knew about that because he announced that he was doing it. And then they got questions. And then the White House communications director gave that statement about doing everything they can to protect the president, including misdirection and or distractions and misdirections, which was a little strange. Then it turned out that, within 24 hours of the New York Times' reporting about the fact that there had been a concern by government officials about the president taking the Qatari gifted jet, which does not have the same defensive capabilities as the older Air Force One models. The reporters on the story, my colleagues, faced subpoenas, not subpoenas that were delivered through counsel, but FBI showing up at people's homes, which is not normally how this is done. And subpoenas are not supposed to be the very first stop on the road in leak investigations. Those subpoenas don't exist anymore, but what now turns out is that the president wasn't even on that plane. Now, our reporting is that there was a credible threat. We don't know what the threat was, Nicole. So, it's hard for me to assess what I don't know. I'm not an intel official. They deemed it credible, and, there is reason to believe that they did. The behavior indicates that they did. But what then ends up happening is, and they are always going to put the president's safety first, what ends up happening is the press and some of his own staff end up on the older Air Force One, which does have defensive capabilities, which certainly would be safer than the Qatari jet in that moment. The president could have, in that clip that you showed, where he was briefing reporters on the Qatari jet that they got aboard and was flying from the UK base, which was deemed safer than the Ankara airport in Turkey, flying back to the US to Joint Base Andrews, he could have said, we had a concern, we had a threat, I was on a separate plane. He could have told reporters off the record. The White House could have told reporters off the record. None of that happened. Instead, there is this gamesmanship where he's sort of taunting and saying, if I go, you go. And that was not the case in that moment. Again, I want to stress, I understand that the federal government is rightly going to be more worried about the president than it is anybody else. But there are trade-offs, and that was one of them.
Maggie, do you now think that the subpoenas were to find out if you guys knew where he really was, or if they were to ascertain? Does it make you wonder what the subpoenas were for in the first place?
It's a good question, and I can't say that I fully understand it. The Times was not the only outlet that reported some of this material at the time. Maybe there were subpoenas to other news outlets and we weren't aware of them. I don't know, but it mostly seemed to be, from my understanding, and again, maybe there is more here. Clearly, there is always a lot more that we don't know when it comes to this particular government. But they are very good at creating these displays of openness. Jonathan and I wrote about this in Regime Change, and in fact, it's just a show. It's a spectacle. They're very good at keeping secrets when they want to, and this was one they tried to. But I don't know if the secret they were attempting to keep was this, or if they were just generally trying to intimidate from further reporting in general. We know that this president likes secrecy and does not like information getting out of his government unless he sanctions it. So it could be, answer D, all of the above. I don't know.
And Maggie, I was on the other side of the relationship, but I can't imagine a situation where you do not level up with the White House pool and the White House press corps that travels with you. Obviously, on September 11th, it was an extraordinary event, and not all the press went on with President Bush. He ended up in Nebraska, but they were not used as a decoy, one, and they were made aware of what was happening and why. So both the security threat, that the towers had been hit, the Pentagon had been hit, and there was an obvious threat to the president, and the fact that we weren't going to send them up in a plane so that whoever was attacking the country that day thought the president of the United States was on it when he wasn't. I cannot fathom that practice. And I wonder if it makes you rethink, or your colleagues rethink, the relationship with this White House.
I think we're pretty clear that this White House doesn't like the press, and beyond that, does not really think much of the public's right to know, and doesn't see the press as anything more than a means to an end for what President Trump personally wants. And I don't think that that is new here. I think that that has been pretty consistent the whole time for this presidency. I think in the first term, I think you did have people who at least recognized some role of what government is supposed to do, and they do at times have that. I don't want to suggest that this relates to every single thing. Not everything is completely binary. But in this instance, and there have been others, to your point, it's not unheard of that there would be some kind of subterfuge involved to try to keep a president safe. But presidents, to your point, President Bush traveled with reporters, albeit a slimmed down press pool, after 9/11. Presidents have taken reporters with them, including this president in his first term, into war zones. Reporters end up making an agreement on the understanding of good faith with White Houses that we will keep this off the record until we land or until we are in a specific spot. And then the public is informed. What this speaks to is this broader idea of secrecy, which is a huge hallmark of this government in a way that I personally have never seen with a federal government or frankly any other.